Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Saturday, October 9th, 2021. Before I get to today's show, I got a couple announcements I want to make. First of all, I want to thank all of our supporters for continuing to show their support for us. I'm asking folks to no longer do super chats in our chats from now on, as YouTube takes 30% of that money that you donate and puts it in their pocket. And with the recent reports of them to not allow ad revenue anymore on Google or YouTube's platform, I certainly don't want anyone that listens to this channel supporting YouTube and handing them more money at this point. So if you guys do feel obligated to make a donation, please do so at our PayPal link or go on to our our Patreon channel and become a member for as low as $1. With that being said, I'd like to go ahead and start the show with a thank you to everyone who has contributed since yesterday's show. Noel May, Victor P, Christina T, Judy D, Stephen H, Kenneth Harriet. Oh, sorry about that, guys. It's kind of hard for me to remember not to read the whole last name here, but thank you, Ken H, Melissa H, and Top Tier Epic. Also, Travis B, Tom L, Knife Collector, James B, Scrappy Cat, Randy W, Seth R, Kathleen R, and Condi R. Again, folks, without you and your contributions to this channel, we would not be here and we would not be able to spread the information as far as we can, like we can with you guys. So again, thank you from the bottom of our hearts here at the Grand Solar Minimum channel, and welcome. All right, let's get right to it. Our space weather news. Solar wind speeds are coming in kind of light. We're looking at 301.3 kilometers per second. It was actually at 299 just a little bit ago, but I refreshed, and space wind is barely picking up. Density is coming in at a 7.1. We do have one sunspot, if you look right there in the middle, in the northern section of our star, and this has been a busy little sunspot here. AR 2882, it's sunspot number 13. Now that's very little. This is a very common size for a sunspot during solar minimum. And I can't tell, folks, that we are in the uptick part of solar cycle 25. Now I know we've seen some activity. We've had a couple of days where we've had multiple active regions on the sun. Yes, there has been some uptick in solar activity. But here we are in this next lull of activity from our sun. Now we see something coming around the southern part in the eastern limb. That should be rearing its head around soon, and we'll be able to determine if that qualifies for a sunspot yet or not. But for now, we are just dealing with the one in the northern hemisphere of the sun, and that has now released not one, but two solar flares. Yesterday, we saw a C-Class 2.6 solar flare from this region, and now today, we are seeing AR 2882 releasing a M-Class solar flare, a 1.6. Very weak. In fact, let me go ahead and let's go to SPACEWEATHER.com real quick. One more thing before we leave this, though. Cosmic radiation is at 9.2%, folks. That's still solar minimum levels. KPNC is at 2 with a 24-hour max of 2. So solar wind is at minimum levels. We have one sunspot and a weak corona that could be producing a couple of corona holes that are turning Earth-facing as we speak. We see low sunspot number 13 on this one active region. Cosmic radiation is above 9% on the dosage rates, and our KPNCs are low at 2. And we always talk about what low solar activity contributes to. Let's continue. Here we are at thegrandsolarminimum.com, our website, and space weather section. I want to show you really fast, though. Look at the solar X-ray flux. And this is telling us that we've had a couple of minor solar flares today. Nothing major, though, folks. You got to remember, this is nothing to freak out about. M classes are moderate. They can be troublesome, but nothing on a large scale. GPS malfunctions, maybe some brownouts, stuff like that. And then the C-class ones here back before it. Now, this is all from the same sunspot, folks. So it's been crackling here for a few days. But these are very minor solar flares, nothing to freak out about. And really, the geomagnetic activity has been flat. Look at the KP indices, barely staying above 1 for the past several days. So we have tons of low solar activity happening at this time, right? And I'd like to attribute, on top of low solar activity, the actual formation right now here. When we're looking at this right here, let me go ahead and zoom in just a little bit here. So with low solar activity and the way our planets are aligned right now, all right, it's got to be contributing to the seismic activity that I'm about to go over here. But here we are once again looking at the charts for solar X-ray flux, M-class and a couple of C-class flares. KPs have been low. And what does this all mean, right? With everything involved with cosmic radiation being up, planetary alignments, and low solar activity equals, well, here we go. So we have a 6.8 on October 9th, which is today. This hits Fiji. This was registered at a depth of about 315 miles, so very, very deep earthquake. Also, we've had a 6.1 earthquake yesterday, a shallow 6.1 in the southwestern part of the Pacific Ocean. Again, this one not as deep. This one was 18 miles, so very, very shallow. But what I want to point out, yeah, you're saying to yourself, these are out in the middle of the ocean, not harming anything. Still upticks in seismic activity. A strong 6.1 hits near Tokyo, Japan. Now, this one is going to make people a little nervous. This is the first time that we've had anything this strong in this area since 2011. In fact, the officials say an intensity of a 5+ was recorded in Tokyo's 23 wards in Saitama for the first time since the 9 earthquake, the magnitude of 9 earthquake in March of 2011. We all remember what happened there. So this definitely is giving people a little bit of nerves. And folks there, the JMA is saying that they need to be on alert for the next week, that more seismic activity could occur. So we'll stay tuned to this. This could be a dangerous situation. It could add to structural damage. But I will say this. After that earthquake, there was a lot of engineering going on in that area of Japan. So I feel like that they've done a good job at trying to let's say, solidify their structure just in case if anything like that ever happens again. So a lot of structures are being changed the way they're built. They're supposed to be resistant to earthquakes. So hopefully things are, we've learned from our mistakes in structural and engineering from what happened back in March of 2011. So, but we'll still keep our eyes on this, still nervous tensions. And I want to add too that 2011, 2021, oddly enough, we're getting these weird signals from this part of the island of Japan right after the deep solar minimum again. So we'll see if there's any connection to that. Hopefully this is all the activity that we get from this region. And that 6.0 earthquake has destroyed 4,000 homes. Well, they're uninhabitable, but still the same thing. Also, there was a death that was recorded in Greece. Now, this was back on October 7th when they reported this story. Shallow 5.9 earthquake hits Pakistan, killing at least 20 and injuring over 300. This was dated on October 7th. Yes, folks, we've had a series of days of low solar activity. The reason why I'm rifling through these because this is what's happened over the past few days since the sun's kind of quieted down a little bit. Major explosion at Stromboli volcano. A significant amount of pyroclastic material here in Italy. Again, I'll show you some pictures of this. This one's been going off and on since 2017. So the ash plume, about a little bit like what we're seeing at La Palma, or had seen at La Palma, but still another uptick in seismic activity. And the biggest correlation with all this is the space weather. The low activity that we are experiencing right now. If you read the books by John Casey of Upheaval, other people out there who follow this theory, that there is some connection between the sun's magnetic field and the Earth's magnetic field, and that when the sun's activity is lower than average, there's something that jolts seismic activity. So to me, watching what the sun's doing right now, even when there is active sunspots on here, we're still dealing with moderate solar winds in the 300s, nothing crazy. You know, we haven't had a lot of geomagnetic activity. I mean, the storms that we've had as far as geomagnetic activity have been G1s. In fact, we've only had one G3 geomagnetic storm that I can remember since 2020. A couple of 2s and several G1 storms. Even though that SPACEWEATHER.com showed us a chart last week that shows that we are probably almost 6 to 8 months ahead of schedule as far as where we're supposed to be in the strength of this cycle, I still feel like that we're seeing these periods of high activity followed by lulls. And since I wasn't monitoring solar cycle 24 like I am 25, it's hard to compare. Is 25 going to be stronger than 24? Because a lot of indications right now it's a 50-50. And I kind of feel like it's been like that since the forecast started coming out, that we were talking about sunspot numbers from anywhere from 97 to 147. The official forecast came somewhere right there in the middle, around 125-ish or a little bit more. Even if sunspot number count for this cycle is at 160, let's say it jumps up that high. I'm not saying it will, but let's just say it does. Folks, the average smooth sunspot number is between 180 and 220. That's just average. So if we're below average, that means solar cycle 25 is still considered lower solar activity than average. So you see, solar cycle 24 really kind of kicked off this grand solar minimum period, if you ask me. Smooth sunspot numbers below 140 for that cycle. And then we move into 25, still the very early stages, waiting for that terminator event. Terminator event apparently has not happened. So folks, the further away we get from April of 2021, the signal of a stronger solar cycle will fade away. If we get this terminator event within the very near future, then we can expect, or we can assume to expect, an uptick, a high uptick in solar activity, as if this solar cycle will be kickstarted into the next gear. But the further out, and they say between 10 and 15 years is when these terminator events happen. The further away from 10 years we get, the weaker the cycle will be. Now, just based on what we're seeing right now, I still think we're going to experience a weak cycle, and it might be a mild week, not as weak as solar cycle 24. I could be wrong. Things could really shut off here in the next few years. However, it would be fair to say that it's going to be a mild cycle, and we could see the terminator event, believe it or not, but maybe not for another year or two. If you look at it from a 10 to 15 year scale, and we're seeing the sun periodically acting like it wants to get started, but then it seems to quiet down for a few weeks, and then it comes back with a fury, and then it goes away and acts like solar minimum again. You'll know we're in the maximum. You'll constantly see sunspots in the northern and southern bands of our sun, and by the end of this solar cycle, the sunspots will be almost directly in the middle of our star before the minimum starts the whole cycle all over again, and we start from the top and work our way back into the middle. Right now, you can see that we are at the very beginnings of this solar cycle just based on the position of these sunspots, how far north and south they actually are in each side of the sun, respectively. So we'll continue to monitor solar activity as always. That will not be censored on YouTube, thankfully. It's the disagreement of greenhouse gases causing climate change is what's going to get this channel in trouble starting November 1st. So just to let everybody know, this channel is not going to change its format. We will report on grand solar minimum topics, report on space weather, and give you updates. If you want to talk about the policies that we're getting ready to speak about here soon on this channel. We can still do it now, but after November 1st, all of this kind of climate talk is going to be moved over to our Patreon channel. Patreon is not shutting anybody down right now for speaking out with scientific facts going against GHG and the theory that it is warming the planet. Now, this channel has never ever used a claim that wasn't validated by a scientific paper, ever. So we will continue to give you that information, and that's why I encourage everyone to join our Patreon as low as $1, where you can continue to get that information. And the Patreon channel on November 1st should be our official launch, and we will start putting out content almost daily on Patreon, as well here at YouTube. Because folks, space weather, solar weather, it's always going to be a factor. And if you've been following this channel for a long time, you'll understand what we're talking about here on YouTube with the space weather aspect of it. And then over at Patreon, we can show you the climate policies that are tearing this country apart and possibly collapsing it right now as well. I want to say hello to Lee Wheelbarger in the chat. Good to have you out there, my friend. All right, so let's move on. Before we go into our climate talk stuff, I wanted to show a couple headlines for weather real quick. And right now we're dealing with, this is old, October 6th, but Italy set a new record. They got a crap ton of rain. The day started with about 19.5 inches of rain in just 6 hours in parts of Italy. Okay, breaking the country's 6-hour rain record. Now, ironically, we're seeing 2011 again. 18.6 inches of rain fell in 2011 in that same 6-hour period. So we're seeing earthquakes in Japan that we haven't seen since 2011. And now we're seeing rain totals, records, that we haven't seen since 2011. The good news is that the earthquake wasn't stronger than the one we had in 11, so thankfully. But the reason why we're seeing more rainfall from recently compared to 2011 is because our atmosphere has an abundance of highly charged particles, cosmic radiation, due to our weak magnetosphere. So we've accumulated a lot of highly charged particles in our atmosphere, and it's just saturating the atmospheres. And that's why we're seeing so much of these record-breaking rain events, snow events, especially snow events here soon. Believe it or not, we'll be talking about that here shortly. But I wanted to report this because it wasn't done just then. No, 29.2 inches of rain fell in just 12 hours. So an additional 10 inches fell in another 6 hours. Yeah. So 30 inches of rain in 12 hours. We saw the 28 inches in China in 24 hours, which broke a record. Now, Italy, and you want to talk about why this happened, and I can thank my friend Lee Wheelbarger for teaching me about it. Atmospheric compression. Watch this radar and what happens as it gets over, explodes. That, folks, is a huge indication of atmospheric compression right there. And that is the reason why we saw this huge outburst of heavy, heavy rain. And you can see where the slow-moving system dropped just so much moisture in a short period of time, folks. 29 inches in just 12 hours. Some areas don't get that in a year. Some areas don't get that in 2 years. This part of Italy got 29. And look, I'm not here to report all the flooding and the damage. We know what came with that, okay? That's not fun. And that's why it is important that the United States does help the infrastructure system. And I mean the sewers and the streets and all that. I'm not talking about anything else but that. Like, we do need to prepare this country here in the United States. We need to upgrade our sewer systems, our storm drainage systems. Look at what happened in New York City. It had nothing to do with what they say is climate change. And here after November 1st, I can't even make those kind of comments on this channel. But I'm just letting you know, the flooding in New York City had nothing to do with climate change, but simply the fact that our infrastructure in New York City is so outdated, it can't handle such events. Because these storms, these events that are happening, are once in 400, 500-year events. These aren't your typical 1 in every 100-year events, and you're asking yourself, well, what's the difference? Well, right now we're still learning on what the difference is with that, right? we're trying to figure out if there's a significance on why one happens in 100 years, one happens in 1,000 years. Is there a deeper connection? Is there more cosmic radiation in the atmosphere of these 1 in 1,000 year storms? The point I'm trying to make is that when you hear 1 in 100 years, 1 in 500 years, 1 in 1,000 years, there's a cycle there, right? So if it happens naturally every 1,000 years, which 1,000 years ago, I'm pretty sure we weren't flying private jets and driving Range Rovers. So obviously, this has happened several times in the history of our planet, which would occur to be as a natural cycle. You can't blame man-made global warming 1,000 years ago when you had 40 inches of rain in 2 days. It has nothing to do with man and its industrial activity. It has everything to do with the sun's magnetic field and how it affected Earth's magnetic field. Was it weak 1,000 years ago? Is that why we saw this gigantic amount of rain? Absolutely. More than likely it was. It's probably on one of the grand solar minimum cycles for all we know. I'm sure if we research these dates, every time we see these 1 in 500 year storms, 1 in 600 year storms, I'm sure we're going to find that these are right around grand solar minimum times. So there is a correlation of low solar activity with not just heavy precipitation being rain or snow, but just like the articles I showed you here, look at all these earthquakes that we're having up and down all over the world. Okay, 6.0, 6.1. These are not crazy hardcore, but they're moderate enough. There's a 6.0 there, a 5.9, killing 20 people. And then, of course, Stromboli eruption. We're still dealing with La Palma. Kilauea is a little bit alive, a little bit, not much, but it's there. So you're darn right. The low solar activity is contributing to all of these anomalies that we're seeing right now. And it's been proven in several peer-reviewed papers. All right, so weak tropical system to pose numerous risks along the East Coast. What that might be, we'll go ahead and take a look at this. We did mention this on our broadcast the last time we did a weather update, that we could be seeing some kind of a tropical system affecting the East Coast by the 13th. Now we're looking at somewhere around tonight through Monday, which is close. We're a little early, but still. What are going to be the impacts that are going to happen from this particular storm? Well, coastal flooding, strong rip currents, and rough surf. Minor coastal flooding, all the way from Boston, well, actually in New Jersey, Atlantic City, all the way through Melbourne, Florida, not Melbourne, Australia, but gusty winds impacting South Carolina and most of North Carolina as well. And this is through Sunday. And then on Saturday, we'll see coastal rain. Now, I'm not so sure how much of this rain is affected from this system that's on the East Coast, but it does look like a heavy amount of rain is going to fall in the Carolinas into Virginia. Some light showers for most of Pennsylvania and western New York. Also, Scott Rose and company out there, you're just barely missing that rain in Michigan, but I wouldn't be surprised if a stray sprinkle heads your way. And then look at the weather, the temperatures here. Gorgeous weather, 5 to 15 degrees above average here on Monday across most of the Ohio Valley into the western part of New York, and even in the interior northeast, Vermont, New Hampshire. Very, very beautiful weather. Very humid on the East Coast, and that's all due to this tropical system that's off the coast. I'll get more into what we are expecting, though, after this nice, warm little period of weather. This might be for the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, Pittsburgh area, Detroit. This might be your last exhale of warmth that we see for the rest of this year. I can't promise it because things have happened, but it's looking likely as we get past the middle part of October, things are starting to get in line with fall and maybe even possible winter. In fact, yeah, winter indeed. Blockbuster snowstorm, here's what we're talking about. We're talking about heavy snow in parts of Wyoming and, of course, Colorado, just outside of Denver, but in the Rockies, a storm total of 30 inches is possible. And you could see the majority of this snow is going to be falling the heaviest near Casper, Wyoming, and Helena, Montana, in those central regions. So my guess is that we're talking about mostly higher elevations. Nonetheless, a 30-inch snowstorm at this time of year is pretty impressive. Cool and dry to the west of it, but showers and rain up until that moment Saturday as it brings in this system behind it. And then by Sunday, this strong cold front will come in from Canada. Thanks a lot, BC and Alberta. No, I'm just kidding. Rain and showers across Washington and Oregon begin to move southeast as it progresses through Monday. This system picks up steam. You'll start to see the snow first in Idaho and Montana and parts of northwestern Wyoming on Monday before we get to around Tuesday, where we start to see some crazy cold. Coldest air mass of the season, record lows challenge interior frost freeze danger, and not as cold near the coast. But folks, in most parts of California is going to feel the chill. If you live in Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco, it's probably still going to be slightly jeans and jacket weather at that time. So our first major snowstorm is on the way here in the Rockies. Not surprising, actually a little late. We saw some snow showers last year in September. This year, we've had a little bit of an Indian summer. So kind of impressed with the warmth that we've had so far this early part of fall. But I have a feeling that the wheels are about to fall off, and we could start seeing record cold once again, infiltrating the lower 48 within the next several weeks. Speaking of cold, and this is off of AccuWeather, so I'm not cherry picking here. I'm not having to dig real deep to find this information. AccuWeather actually reported on just how cold it got in the Antarctica. Now, I like how they try to make it look like that their cousin up north is the reason why we have so much warmth, because they just can't hold it together up there. Unlike its flashier cousin, North Pole, which has been made famous for its mythical holiday residents, the South Pole hasn't been as directly exposed to the effects of heating climate. While rising temperatures and melting ice shelves have caused some worry for climatologists, the South Pole, and by the way, the big misinformation of this article right now is that they're not even mentioning the record snow mass gains in Greenland. They're not mentioning the ice gain that we've had all year in the Arctic. It's stayed steady. We had melt, but it's not as bad as it has been the last several years. Things are starting to show as if the northern part, the North Pole, is starting to get much colder. And if there's any indication about what happened in the South Pole last winter, I hope that doesn't mean it's going to happen now up here in the northern. Because if it is, boy, are we in for a really, really cold winter. In fact, look at some of these temperatures across Antarctica. These are maps showing the lowest temperatures at selected Antarctica stations between September 30th and October 1st. Obviously, this is their winter. But look at that. Negative 69 degrees. This is Celsius. Negative 79 degrees. I've seen reports of negative 85 from this area as well. Of course, AccuWeather is not going to talk about it. The intense polar vortex can be partially tied to a weak La Nina conditions that return later in the southern hemisphere winter. So if we're going to see our La Nina be as weak, I just wonder if the transfer of cold is going to reflect into the North Pole like it has in the South Pole. Still lots to be watched, but good to see that mainstream media is actually reporting some of the truth, which is we had a very cold, very, very, very cold Antarctica this winter. Shattered all kinds of temperature records. And like I said, you can't count out its cousin in the north, as they call it, because we had some significant snow mass gains this year as well. So some things to watch right now, especially on how this colder air mass is starting to creep its way south as we get closer to the end of October. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. Two articles I want to go over. And the first one deals with biomass. And over in the UK, this particular company here, Drax Renewable Energy Plant, is the UK's biggest CO2 emitter. Now, this biomass, this wood burning, is considered to be green energy. And the problem with that green energy title is that the UK excludes these biomass emissions from its total count because, like the EU, it treats bioenergy as immediately carbon neutral on the assumption that forest regrowth soaks up the carbon again. Okay. So here is the EU and the UK admitting they moved the field goal posts for people that are using green energy because it's renewable and reliable. I don't know. I'll read on and show you guys where this is not smart. And I'm so glad I saw this article because I never thought of it this way. But it says here, the amount of pollution from burning wood for power is not disputed by bioenergy companies, but this analysis may fan the flames of the debate about bioenergy's renewable status. Critics point out that forests take decades to regrow and recapture all the carbon again, allowing warming emissions to accumulate in the atmosphere just when the world seeks to slash emissions by 2050. So what they're saying is that this biomass, not only is it emitting more CO2 in the atmosphere, but its theory that the regrowth of forests will soak up the extra carbon is a bunch of hooey as well, because it takes a good 10 to 40 years to really start seeing an advancement of a forest regrowth. And at the rate we burn energy, especially if we use biomass even more, at that rate, this planet would be without trees in about a decade itself. And after that decade, it's going to consume all of its harvest at that time at a more record alarming rate, and no way to regrow it fast enough to keep up with demands. So, biomass gets a pass on CO2 emissions because it's supposed to be green, because you're burning wood pellets and not coal and oil and natural gas. Now, I want to point out, too, that this company, Drax, I think that's what it's called, is dirtier. And what I mean by that, it is dirtier than the coal plants, the dirtiest coal plants in the UK. Wrap your heads around that for a minute, folks. This biomass plant puts out more emissions than the dirtiest coal plant in the UK. What? And their totals don't count towards the count of CO2 emissions because they produce biomass, because they're not burning fossil fuels. So if you don't burn fossil fuels, that CO2 doesn't count because it doesn't fit their narrative, right? Look at what they're doing to people that don't follow their narrative on YouTube and Google. They're going to stop advertising on people like Mark Morano. Is Mark Morano a dummy? No. Is Steve Malloy a dummy? No. Are the folks at the Heartland Institute, are they dummies? No. But yet, they're being suppressed. Love this article here on What's Up With That. Google demonetizes websites which contradict their climate narrative. Folks, I'm not going to go on the long rant that I went on the other day, but I'm going to say this. I didn't mention this. And Steve Malloy and Mark Morano did an awesome job at relaying the message here, folks. And that is the fact that they are telling us, Google and YouTube, that their advertisers don't want climate denial topics on their next to their product is false. I don't believe it, and neither does this writer here. I'm not sure I believe Google's explanation. If they were taking care of commercial customers who don't want their ads to appear next to climate skeptic stories, they could just add a checkbox to their ad management console, protecting clients who are sensitive about appearing next to climate skeptics, while retaining the revenue from what are frequently very popular stories. In other words, he's saying, if you're a major company like Budweiser, and you're making a lot of money on ad revenue, and the content is just content that challenges the supposed, the consensus, because a lot of folks in the science industry know that there is no consensus in science. So if you have an advertiser who knows that the content from that particular YouTube creator is presenting scientific peer-reviewed papers from PhD scientists, as a CEO or head honcho at a major corporation, I'm thinking to myself, well, scientific data accepted in journals. People have to pay money to read these journals. Obviously, people in this demographic of the global cooling community, you have to have money to do the research, unfortunately, folks. If you want the education, you have to pay for that stuff. And Budweiser and Kraft and all these other major corporations know that. Their marketing management understands how money works. Trust me. So I believe YouTube and Google kind of told us a porky about advertisers upset about having their ads next to climate skeptics. That's false, because money is money. And as long as the content is not dangerous, as long as it's not causing harm or putting people in danger, how can you dispute scientific peer-reviewed papers as non-factual? And one more thing I'd like to add before I go over our GFS weather report. Mark Morano and Steve Malloy brought this up as well. And actually, this is where I'm taking it from, because I wish I would have articulated this aspect. If we were wrong, and when I say we, I mean me and you and everybody else in the climate skeptic community, if we were wrong, we would simply just be laughed off of the internet, right? We'd be laughed off the internet. In fact, if we were so wrong, there wouldn't be any censorship or lack of ad monetization, because this is being done as a punishment, okay? There's nothing happening dangerous in this community except for educating folks. And it just feels like, the way the school systems are, our kids can't even write their name in cursive anymore. It feels like we're being dumbed down. And if you take away other options and just leave the only option, well, then the choice is clear. As more generations go by, there's no other information to look at, so it has to be true, right? Because the powers that be are forcing this on us. They are cramming it down our throats, whether you like it or not. Whether a scientist with a PhD in astrophysics or solar physics, even if he challenges it with a published paper in a review journal, Google and YouTube are not going to allow any kind of ads or anything being paid on it as a punishment to those creators, in hopes that they get discouraged and stop producing what they call misinformation. But what they don't realize is that they've given us a huge boost of confirmation of natural solar cycles. Natural solar cycles. They are confirming this, because if this was not a threat, they wouldn't be threatening to take money away from people. They think it's going to hurt this community. It's not. People will find ways to continue to show their content without being censored. Okay? But again, this confirms that we are onto something. And right now, we're messing up the flow of what the New World Order wants, right? Of the Biden administration, this Green New Deal. They can't pass it if they've got channels like us and Mark Morano and Steve Malloy and the Heartland Institute and Patrick Moore and folks like here on YouTube, like Adapt 2030, Lee Wheelbarger, Ice Age Farmer, guys like that who can communicate to the masses in a way that folks can understand. Those are the dangerous people. That's why they're getting their money stripped away from them. Hit them where it hurts. You're too effective. You're hurting the narrative. Look at what they did to the COVID channels. Anyone who spoke any kind of dissent towards COVID vaccines or the lockdowns, their channel got banned on YouTube. This is crazy. Anybody that says we live in a free country has been living under a rock for the last 4 years. That's all I got to say. Because it started with Trump's administration, because all these activist groups, and it wasn't Trump's fault, I'm just saying all these activist groups were really trying to nail him hard and make him look bad, so they tried to push all these new regulations and new changes in his face, and just to make him look bad, right? And it's continuing to get worse with this new administration. Continuing. Thank God for Joe Manchin. Thank God for Joe Manchin. The only thing that's keeping this disastrous $3.5 trillion bill from passing and making you, the consumer, pay more for your gas, pay more for your energy, pay more for your food, pay more for your supplies, and then they're going to put a GPS on your car and monitor the miles that you travel and send you a bill in the mail for the carbon tax stuff. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to let the cat out of the bag, the powers that be. I'm sorry that I'm trying to help my fellow Americans understand what they're voting for when they vote in these left-wing Democrats. Forget about your policy and your politics. Think about the future and what things are going to cost when it comes to cost of living, food, energy. I just went over the whole list. And if you look at these new policies, we're talking trillions of dollars of investments too. This $3.5 trillion bill is already turning into a $5.3 trillion bill when everything's said and done. That's what I heard. So what's it going to be in 6 years? 12.4 trillion? 10 years? 30 trillion? Who knows? Because we're already seeing a lot of problems right now. Companies that relied only on solar and wind are having to shift to coal because of how cold it is. And then they find out there's a coal shortage because of COVID restrictions and shipping problems all over the world. This is not the time to get rid of any kind of fossil fuel energy related product. This is not the time. This is not the time to even flirt with it. Okay? Now, I've always been a big proponent of solar power if it's attached to your home. If you're not on the main grid, if you're at your own home and you have the money to put the system that you want to put to help run your property, that to me I always felt like would be the best option instead of trying to put everybody on one giant grid and hoping that it's enough to feed everyone's needs. I've always said that, and I always agree with that. I think personal solar use is going to be way more successful than if they try to put it all in one big storage facility. But these Green New Deal policies, these climate change policies, the way that they're doing things right now on Google and YouTube, they're just confirming what we have been saying. They don't take money away from Planet X channels. You don't see advertisers complaining supposedly about their ads popping up in Planet X videos. Nope. You don't hear advertisers that are showing up on Flat Earther channels complaining, do you? Nope. Because money is money. And we still say it to this day that those channels are fake and that they have entertainment for entertaining purposes only, those type of titles in their videos to help beat YouTube's AI so they can still get money for spreading misinformation. That's the way they do it. These guys, these cons that run these Planet X theory channels and Flat Earth and all these other weird conspiracy channels, they're cons. And they know how to get around certain words to help them keep their channel monetized. They do no real research. They have no real education. They have nothing. They don't have real solar physicists with PhDs working with them to help them understand how the solar system works. And I can tell you right now, folks on this channel and other channels that you watch, Lee Wheelbarger, myself, Adapt 2030, all of us rely on the real scientists. Okay, the Valentines Arkovas of the world, the Willie Soons of the world. You know, we don't go after Bill Nye and an 18-year-old girl who doesn't have any background in climate science, but says we ruined her childhood, by the way, as she's riding on her Swedish train, eating her filet mignon, and enjoying the beautiful view of the train ride. Meanwhile, there's some kid in Africa mining up some mineral for $0.00 an hour so that greedy people across the world can be filthy rich. But we've stolen Greta's childhood, so my God, it has to be a climate emergency. All right, I'm just saying. Yeah, John Casey, indeed, as well, John. Of course, Lee. John Casey's the foundation of the Grand Solar Minimum channel, in my opinion. His information, his book, makes more sense to me now than it did 4 years ago because everything's coming true that he wrote about 4 years ago and beyond. So, I had to get that off my chest, folks. So it's not about the money. The anger is not about, oh, we're losing income now, we're losing ad revenue. No, we can still figure out ways to cover the cost of this website and this YouTube channel and other things that go into this channel. You guys have already showed us that. We have huge support from our community. We had so many new Patreons. We had so many new donations yesterday. I can't thank you for the support. And that shows me that people are listening and that people understand that this is real and this is factual. Folks aren't going to throw away their money on stuff that's fake. We got enough con artists out there. We got enough fake religion, fake cult stuff out there to dupe you out of money. Folks are showing their appreciation left and right, and I can't tell you, to me, that ever since Google and YouTube pulled this out, we are starting to see the real supportive people come out of this community. And I think you're going to see a lot of fighting going on, folks. The bigger cats that are above the YouTube stuff, like the Moranos and, you know, the Stossel, well, I can't remember his first name. Is it Jack Stossel, Steve Stossel, something like that? I know he's starting to get involved with some court stuff with climate talk. There's actually a fact checker that already told him, Stossel, that they had no validity in their fact check on him against climate change. So he's taking them to court for that. I'm assuming these fact checkers at Facebook, to me, you have to be transparent and show their credentials. This fact checker, what does he do? What's his education? What college did he go to? What was his grade point average? Because I don't want some guy who delivers pizza on the side fact checking my website. Okay? I don't want some guy who went to community college for basket weaving to come over to Facebook and tell me whether or not if this peer-reviewed PhD written paper is factual or not. No thanks. No thanks. All right, let's check out our GFS extended forecast here in the upcoming days to, let's go out 7 days. I'll always show you what the GFS is thinking until the end of the month. But again, you can't really trust anything from GFS past 7 to 8 days. That's just my honest opinion. Let's take a look at all the moisture that we have right now. There is our storm off to the east coast. You guys can see that. This is going to be hanging around for a few days. Could cause some coastal issues like we said earlier, but nothing too crazy at the moment. It does not appear that we're going to see any kind of major landfall from this system. So let's go ahead and check out the GFS in motion. We see our storm across the Rockies beginning to take shape, and our system is just stalled out right off the coast of North Carolina. So that's what's going to bring all the rain and the riptides. And of course, GFS does not want to work. Oh, that's cute. This is the bad part of the day to be looking at these models. It always seems like we have incomplete data. So I want to apologize as the GFS is not ready to show us an extended forecast late. But let's do this. Let's go to the 6Z. Because the 6 will at least show, I think, yeah, here we go. So this was the last model run before the current. We'll show you that one later. But this one is going to indicate pretty close details that we were going to look at anyway. There's that snow moving in from the northwest, making its way down into the Rockies. More rain forming across parts of Missouri and eastern parts of Kansas as well, dragging all the way through Arkansas, parts of northwest Louisiana, and Texas as well. That system moves out by October 11th off the east coast. Snow coming into the northwest part and the Rockies, dropping up to 30 inches in some parts as that low pressure system continues to trek north into the northern plain states. And that thing gets pretty big, but it's going to stay rain to the north, folks. So don't worry, there's no massive snowstorm coming yet. But over the next several days here in the Rockies, through at least the 13th, we could see up to 30 inches of snow in certain regions. And even now, I was thinking that maybe the Dakotas would get hit with the snow part of this too. GFS has not indicated that cold air is going to follow that quick. That system goes up into Canada and drops snow up there in Saskatchewan as well, and Manitoba. High pressure dropping in behind that in the northwest, cooling things off very nicely. And now we have another warm front that's making its last push. I believe this low pressure system could be the indicator here across the Ohio Valley that this could be the last push of Indian summer warmth. As this system moves out by Sunday, October 17th, this is next weekend, we will start to see that La Nina pattern starting to set up, and it's going to be starting in the northeast first. The northwest is already seeing it. The Colorado Rockies are seeing it. The northeast here at the end of October will also know that fall is here to stay, especially by the time we get to the 22nd. Another low pressure system comes in. Folks, it may even flirt with bringing some snowflakes to the upper parts of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire by the end of October. In fact, GFS is indicating parts of northern Vermont that we could see snowflakes, snow flurries in North Country New York as well, mixing in by the end of October. That's where our temperatures are heading. And looking at this last setting here, the high pressure that's moving in, and I know this is 16 days out, too far to really take any kind of stock into this, but usually the GFS is good about signaling things. And I think what it's trying to tell us here is that we are looking at between October 23rd and October 30th that this cold air is finally going to start making its way into the northern part of the United States, keeping things colder here in the Northeast, the Great Lakes, across the northern plains as well. Like I said, we've already had our first snow system that's arriving now here in the Rockies and in the Northwest. So let's go ahead and take a look at our temperatures, and I'll probably have to switch this to the 6Z, which is fine. They're going to be off by a slight amount, not a lot. And this is what the thinking is. Again, we have Indian summer in full effect here for most of us in the central part of the United States. The Ohio Valley still enjoying very good warmth for this time of year. And as you see that snowstorm moving into the Rockies, that colder air settling in by Monday, look at that. Most of the Northwest is going to be below freezing. Still nice, good, warm weather up into the Ohio Valley, but that starts to change after the 15th of October. More cold moving in. Look at that contrast. Almost 50-50 shot of cold and warm. And as this front continues to push further south, that warmer pocket is getting smaller. In fact, now by October 13th, we're looking at temperatures in the 80s, staying mainly along Virginia and along the East Coast, down south, all the way through Texas is where we'll see the main warmth. But this cold air is still trying to filter through into most of the United States. By October 15th, we are finally half and half. And as you see, those 70s and 80s are starting to get a lot smaller. This is that last hoorah in the Northeast. Temperatures in the 70s on the 15th and the mid-60s by the 16th. And look at the daytime high differences just in 3 days from the 13th. 80s and 90s in some spots, now only getting into the 70s. So fall is making its rude entrance by mid-October, early October 20th. Look at this. On Sunday, October 17th, everybody in the United States, low temperatures will be below 55 degrees unless you live in Arizona and Florida and parts of California. So talk about seeing this record warmth all year and all this talk about how warm and hot it's been. We're about to get a rude awakening here at the end of October. 60s and 70s will dominate at that point. Along the south, you'll still see your 80s in Florida. But look at the colder temperatures coming in from Canada, moving into the United States. 70s and 60s still remain for highs across most of the country, central part especially, but mainly from the Ohio Valley on in the Northeast. We're talking mid-60s and lower. And then as we get closer towards the end of October, the GFS is signaling much, much colder air infiltrating the Northeast, the Great Lakes, and the Northern Plain region. And the very top half of the United States. Look at this, daytime highs. For October 24th, look at that. We have made a huge drop in average temperatures. Now, this is where we should be for this time of year, up here in the Northeast, honestly. But to see it above average all month, and then to start to see some normality coming here towards the end of October. So we will see much cooler and colder temperatures as we get past October 16th. And then as we get further into October 20s, we will also start to see some winter-like conditions appearing in the far northeastern parts of the United States. New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine are the main culprits. North country of New York, but mainly in the higher elevations will we see that. And let's take a look at our El Nino region numbers. And what are we looking at today? Well, looks like a La Nina is imminent as the values are staying right at the threshold, not much below the threshold, but it's right there, and we're in line for maybe a Modaki La Nina, right? And we talked about Modaki El Nino. This could be just a very weak La Nina. We'll have to watch and see this. This also could change as well. Temperatures get cooler as we head into the winter months here in the northern hemisphere. All right, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Grand Solar Minimum channel for a full report. Want to say hello to some faces out there. Teresa Robbins, good to have you. Edward, hello. John, also in the chat. Summer BC, glad to have you. Also, I want to say hello to Bam Bam, one of our newer subscribers. And Lee Wheelbarger, thanks for tuning in as well. Melody Scanman, hello. Scrappy Cat, good to see you out there. Alternatives for Life, and a bunch of new faces that I am not used to seeing in the chat. And of course, my lovely wife, Mari, for help keeping everyone sane, and myself. Lady Tans, hello there. And again, folks, I can't tell you how excited we are about the rebirth of our Patreon channel, the amount of new subscribers to that venue. We are going to bring back the call-in show, which Mari and I are going to try to hope to have it starting maybe, not promising, but maybe next Saturday or the following Saturday. But we will start doing weekly phone calls, live call-in shows, where if you are a member on our Patreon channel, you will get the link and the phone number for the call-in shows, and you'll get to call in and ask questions. Hell, maybe we might even have guests that we can bring on that you can ask questions about grand solar minimum and climate change topics related as well. So stay tuned, folks. Patreon is going to be delivering more content with the call-in shows, and then the stuff that we talked about, like with censorship and climate talk and greenhouse gases not being the driver. That talk is going to be saved on other platforms. The YouTube channel, we're going to keep it space weather related, earthquake, volcano, and report the weather. That's it. So, all right, guys, we hope you have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Most of you out there, this will probably be the last really nice weekend out here. So enjoy it. Get outside. Enjoy nature. And just be good to each other out there. Until Monday, guys, we'll be back with another live update from the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Have a great weekend, and we will talk soon.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.